within about 24 hours when it uploads. You are all muted at this time, as we know a lot of you may be multitasking during your busy day. During the presentation, if you'd like to ask any questions, please use the question or chat pod which you just used on the right side of your screen in the toolbar, and we'll try to get your questions as quickly as possible based on where we're at when the question comes in. There will also be a few pauses that we have built into today's webinar where we'll stop and see if there's any questions. If you wanted to ask a live question, just hit the hand button, raise your hand, and we'll get to that question and I'll unmute you at that time. Now I'd like to introduce our presenter today, Matt Furst. Matt has been a professional computer programmer for over 14 years, and his experience lies in the areas of network technologies, databases, and data structures. Within RealTrack, Matt is responsible for the reporting, accounting integration, and back-end business logic of the RealTrack Performance ERP system. With that, I'd like to turn the call over to Matt.
Thank you, Jeremy. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for attending our little webinar, and hopefully you get some value out of this. As Jeremy mentioned, we're going to discuss kind of invoicing in RealTrack and also how we integrate into accounting systems. Let's just look here at our objectives. Today we're going to use the Sage 50 product for our integration. We did a webinar before a couple weeks ago where we did roughly the same webinar with the QuickBooks accounting system. So everything we show here is going to be valid, and it's going to process going to be very similar. If you happen to be a QuickBooks customer, you can always review the results in QuickBooks on our previous webinar, and Jeremy will be happy to provide you that link, and I'm sure it's probably on our website as well. So just the general overview of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the router within a job and how that relates to the creation of inventory and our finished goods that we're going to ship to our customer. Then we're going to dive into the invoice itself and some of the interfaces there, what's important, what we can change, and what some of the status fields mean and all that sort of good stuff. Then we're going to print a packing list and discuss why a packing list is important and what it means to RealTrack. Then we'll finally get to the point where we're showing off our integration with Sage 50. We'll post an invoice, take a look at it, compare it to the invoice in RealTrack, see how the numbers line up and all that sort of good stuff. We'll take a little brief detour and talk about how RealTrack deals with virtual inventory, where you're kind of shipping goods before they're actually complete, on your production floor, how RealTrack handles that and what goes on when we need to ship before we're actually done, or at least tell the system we're about to ship. And then we'll also discuss the idea of a sales invoice or a multi-line invoice, what that is and why you'd want to use it, and how it will also show the integration of that in with the Sage 50 product. Again, everything on the RealTrack side is going to be the same. It's the same interfaces regardless of if it's going to QuickBooks or Sage. So almost everything we show here is going to be applicable no matter what accounting platform you're on. Roughly after each of these steps, we'll take a pause and we can take any questions that have been queued up. So feel free to submit them into Jeremy whenever you get an opportunity, and as we take a break between each of these big topics, we'll address them. So we'll start out first talking about the router and what it is and how it works. So let me minimize this, and I'm going to pull open my RealTrack system. So this is our internal development system. It's got some mostly good data, a little bit of funny data just because we develop on it. But I created a job in here, job 14J1181. We're going to take a look at that. System pull it up. I'm going to use our search interfaces to find my job. So this is a job. I'm building a skateboard. I'm a skateboard company, we'll say. I produce skateboards. I've already given this job my customer and my drawing, parts, and description information for what kind of skateboard I'm building. If we take a look over at our router really quick, we'll see a lot of the work has been done on this router. So our initial processes are marked complete. We've got some hours and some time associated with them. But right now we're right at the stage where we're about to count the number of pieces that we have and kind of put them on our shelves and get ready for the shipping and invoicing and that stage of the process for this job. So I brought it to this point right before this count operation because I want to notice that there are no pieces for this in inventory currently. So if I take a look at my job, I can see my drawing number is 0808-1978-04. So just for the sake of fun, let's take a look at our inventory and see if we've got any of these floating around, if we've completed some in a past job or what have you. So if I search in my inventory, you'll see, looks like I've got some pieces for a different skateboard from a different job, but you'll see I don't have any for the 0808 1978 04. I don't have any from old jobs or any that I've manually entered in my inventory. So right now I can't ship anything to my customer because I don't have any in my inventory quite yet. So RealTrack automatically creates inventory for you, and this is a real important concept that kind of leads to everything else. So the criteria it uses is if you have a count operation on your router, one or more, whatever is the last count operation on the router, as soon as we add a piece count here, it's going to say, okay, we know that we're finally done counting with our pieces. Let's start transferring those to inventory. So if I log an operation here on count 8 on router operation 80, whatever pieces are done, we're going to say, okay, we're ready to put those into inventory, which is going to be useful later on when we go to print our packing list and all that sort of good stuff. If I don't have any count operations, it's purely based on the last router line. So whatever the last router line is in your job, as soon as you register a piece count to that, we're going to create inventory based on that piece count. So since we don't have any inventory right now and I'm getting ready to invoice my customer, I'm going to create some inventory because we just finished, we'll say, 50 units on the shop floor. So I open up my shop floor interface, and let's say Bradley's working on it right now. I'm going to pick my job, and he's logging into our count operation, so he's going to log in. So Bradley does his business and notices that we've got, we'll say, 50 units complete and ready for shipment. So when Bradley goes to log off here, he's going to say, oh, I've counted 50 good pieces. Operation isn't complete yet because we're still counting and preparing the rest of our shipment. We've got 102 that we're making, and we want to ship 100 to our customer. So I'm going to accept, and we're going to confirm. Now, if I'm not a liar and if everything's working great, when we pull up our inventory, we should now see those 50 units waiting and ready to be shipped. So let's take a look. Take a look at our inventory. 0808. Excellent. So we can see when we logged that completed pieces, we transfer these to inventory. We've got our original job that they came from. We know which company we originally made this job for. We've got the code. We know when it happened, all that sort of cool stuff. We got 50 pieces sitting on hand, waiting to be pushed out via a packing list. And for fun, I'm going to say I'm going to create a ship schedule here and split up my shipments. Right now, it says I'm going to deliver all 100 at once, but really I'm going to deliver 2 shipments of 50. So we'll just go in here and we'll split our shipments equally a month apart. So you can see I'm going to ship these first 50 here to satisfy our initial order, and then whenever I'm done with my next 50, I'm going to ship that at a later date. Right now it's a month later, but I can always tweak that if I so choose. So we'll stop right there real quick. Any questions on what the router is, why we create inventory, and how that kind of plays into it? I know we're still going to see some of the effects from that inventory, but any questions on when RealTrack is going to create inventory and how that happens?
Matt, we don't currently have any questions, so if you want to go ahead and keep moving forward, and I'll let you know if something comes in.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. All right, so we're kind of ready now to create our invoice. We're going to do the fun stuff and actually get paid from our customer. So I'm going to go over to our Invoice tab within our job group. So my first step is I need to create myself a new invoice just to see what's going on. All right, so we've got a few key things here. One of the most important elements that we need to fill out for sure is the quantity that we're going to both ship and invoice for. It's important to understand in RealTrack that we're creating an invoice, but this invoice object and the data we put in here is going to serve both as an invoice that we're going to deliver to our customer, and we're also going to be able to create packing lists from this so that when we ship it, we'll have a piece of paper in there that tells the user what to expect or the customer what to expect and what we've contained in that package. So I've created my 50 units in inventory, and I'm ready to ship them 50 units already. As soon as I update that, we pull in our job price each from our main job page at $40. We can always override this and charge more or less per invoice if we so choose. The job says that we're charging the customer $40, so I'm going to stick with the $40. That nets us a $2,000 balance. We can add individual miscellaneous charges if we want, sales tax and freight. I'm going to keep it simple and just charge them the $2,000 straight up. And a quick note about some of these fields up here in the upper right. So these are kind of our status fields on what's going on with this specific invoice. So right now, we know that this invoice has not been issued. And that means we haven't printed the invoice and told RealTrack this is an official binding document, if you will. It's a legal document that, we're ready to invoice our customer for this many units. So as soon as we go to print this or preview it or export it maybe to Excel or a PDF, RealTrack will ask us if we want to consider this issued. If we say it's issued, this status will change to say issued. And we can also, on our invoice history screen, kind of search based upon whether invoices have been issued or not issued. We've also got this not exported status here in red, and that means we have not pushed this invoice to our accounting package yet. There's a checkbox to make this a credit memo instead of an invoice. So if you need to issue a credit memo to your customer for some problem parts or what have you, this is the same interface. You'd come into the invoice, create a new invoice, and just mark it as a credit memo then. When you go to print the report, it would say credit memo, and you can also export the credit memos into your accounting package. And lastly, we know that we have not printed a packing list yet. Again, when we go into our reports and print a packing list, this status will change to say it's been printed. So I've got my basic information here. I know I'm shipping 50 units. I can add some terms if I want. So we'll say with net 30. We can add an FOB or shipment information as well if we want to go via UPS or what have you. But I'm all set. I'm going to print my report and issue this to my customer. So I go into the report section, and just for the sake of keeping it visual, I'll preview it. Normally you'd print it off and hand it to a customer, or maybe create a PDF that emails to a customer, but let's just preview it, see how it looks. So you can see we've got our customer information. We know we're shipping 50 units. Our back order has not changed yet, and that is because we have not printed our packing list yet. In RealTrack, the packing list is what we consider to be the moment where you're actually pulling something from inventory and delivering it to a customer. And we'll see that in a moment here when we go to print our packing list. So we haven't kind of adjusted our back order yet, but we'll see that in a moment. So we're going to say we're all set with this invoice. Something else kind of cool happens. As soon as we do that, and probably a lot of you customers already know they've been using 10 for a while, but as soon as we create any invoices or purchase orders for our job, we automatically create a PDF version of that and attach it to the job. So you can see we created a little thumbnail here. So somebody looking right at the job, maybe somebody that isn't even interested necessarily in invoicing here, a production manager or what have you, will know automatically we've already issued an invoice for this, I need to get going or what have you. So any invoices or purchase orders that we create, we automatically kind of attach. If you didn't want it, you could always delete it afterwards, but a lot of our customers really like that. It's a pretty cool feature. So we've already created our invoice. You can see since we told it that it was legit, we've switched our status from not issued to issued. So any questions on that? I know that was pretty straightforward and quick, but there's not a whole lot going on here quite yet.
Matt, we do have one question, and the question is it possible to move the split parts to a new job number?
There are lots of different options. So if, for example, you wanted to create an overrun, I'm going to create 200 skateboards instead of the 100. That would work perfectly good. As we count the router lines, we'll end up with eventually 200 pieces in inventory. On this job, we would invoice for the 100 and ship 100. At a later point, then, you could either create a new job and move those parts into that new job if you wanted to maybe touch them up again or something like that. But if you truly just wanted to ship those extra 100 pieces from inventory, that's where we're going to get into the idea of a sales invoice. So we'll talk about that right at the end, is sales invoice and just pulling stuff out of inventory and shipping it to a customer.
Okay, good answer. Next question. Do you always have to type in the terms on the invoice, or can it be set up as a default for each customer?
Great question. You are exactly correct. So the Firsties World of Goods here, which is my, obviously, company, has no defaults for the terms, FOB, and ship via. But if you set those up for that customer, they will automatically pre-populate. Great question.
All right, and last question for this stoppage here. Why would you want an invoice with an incorrect back-ordered quantity?
That's a great question, and usually it's just an order in which your business would create these documents. So typically I would imagine you would create the packing list first, so that would reflect. I just wanted to touch upon the invoice. It's purely for just the presentation, and that I am printing the invoice document first. But you're correct. I would think in most examples you would create the packing list first so that the invoice would reflect that proper number? Another good question.
Okay, thanks, Matt.
Wonderful. All right, so we're going to issue a packing list document for this now. And once we've created that, then we're going to move it over to our Sage 50. So again, we kind of trigger everything based upon the printing of the packing list document. So from within the same invoice, we're going to have the same invoice number and whatnot on this packing slip. I'm going to go into our reports, and instead of doing an invoice, I'm going to switch over into a packing list. I'm just using our generic reports right now. You'll probably have a packing list report that'll have the logo of your company and all that sort of good information. So we'll see something a little bit different when I preview, print, or export this. Another interface is going to pop up that's going to ask us some questions because we need to know some information. So let me preview this, and we'll see what I'm talking about here. So RealTrack is trying to be real intelligent about handling your inventory, your shipment schedules, and the certifications that go into the goods that you produce. So when you go to ship something, we need to know what exactly you're shipping. So if I had created this part in the past, my camel skateboard here, and I had some in inventory, and I was kind of mixing the shipments, I was pulling 20 from stock and 30 from this new job, I need to tell RealTrack that because when you buy material for this job, we keep track of all those certifications and all that material that comes with that. So if I bought a lot of 4140 steel to build my wheels or what have you, and I attach the heat treat certifications and whatnot, we have total traceability in RealTrack 10. We can tell you what other jobs that steel went into, when you ship those jobs, all that sort of cool stuff. So to make sure that we're keeping all that information really tight and we can give you a legitimate accounting of what went where, we need to know what exactly you're shipping. Now this example is a little easier because I've only got the 50 in stock that I created specifically from this job. But if I had created other ones, I would have additional lines in the top half of our interface right here showing what job I made it in, when it was transferred into inventory, and if I had told it what shelf or what location I had put the objects in, we would also have a location here as well. So I can mix and match and say, no, I'm only pulling 30 from this job, pull 20 from stock, and we have that traceability all the way back to the materials and the vendors for those materials that went into that job. My question's really easy right now because I've got 50 in stock from this job, and I'm shipping my 50. The lower half of our interface here is our shipment schedule. So I created it, split it up because I wanted to tell RealTrack, well, I'm going to do an initial lot of 50, and I'm going to do the 50 again later. If for some reason I wanted to satisfy, say 25 of these units are going to satisfy my initial shipment and 25 are going to ship a later shipment, that's fine. But really we need this bottom number to add up to 50 from the various shipment schedules. So I'm just going to say we're going to meet our initial shipment, which isn't due for a couple months, or a month, a little bit more, but and we're still have the outstanding shipment of 50, which we're going to talk about later with virtual inventory. So the important part is both of these values have to equal 50 because we need to know where they're coming from, and we need to know which shipment schedules we're satisfying. So I'm going to hit the Ship Item button, but before I do that, which is going to create a report and it'll rectify the back order number and all that sort of good stuff, but before I do that, I just want to know if we have any questions, that may reflect on this screen before I hit the OK button. I don't want it to go away. So any questions on this screen in particular, why we show it when we're doing a packing list, what the implications are of pulling stuff from inventory, anything along those lines?
We don't have any questions just yet, Matt, but let's give it about 10 seconds. Someone may be typing.
Wonderful, Jeremy. Thanks.
Okay, Matt, let's go ahead and move forward. If we need to come back, we can, but right now we have 0 questions.
All right, great. So I'm going to hit the Ship Items button, and our report is going to pop up here. So as I mentioned, our back order now is rectified. We've got our shipment reflected as well. So typically now you would probably create your true invoice that would present to your customer that would show the true back order has been taken care of. You'll note we don't have any dollar amounts in our packing list because we're just including this in for the guy at the receiving docks that's going to double check that we've got 50 in here and all that sort of good stuff. Our terms have been added and all that goodness as well. So I close out of that. We'll note that our back order number again here on the interface has changed and everything's reflected. And we also know that we've also printed the packing list successfully. All right. So I think it's time that we are ready to probably push this over into our Sage 50. So I am going to minimize my RealTrack and bring up Sage 50. So we work great with Sage 50 in a multi-user environment. If you have multiple users that have Sage 50, each of them can integrate RealTrack into it. It works perfectly fine. So if just depending on how you distribute your work, if there's a couple people that do invoicing, a couple people do purchase orders, all that works fine. Multiple people can communicate at the same time. And as soon as we push an invoice in, we mark the invoice in RealTrack as having been exported, so that somebody else in your office knows that they don't need to export that one again. I've already taken care of some of the initial setup process, which I think we've done for most of our Sage 50 customers, and we have some videos also that are describing that process. So when I want to post an individual invoice, we have this post button here that's going to push it over into the Sage 50 product. We also can do bulk posts from the main screen here as well. So if we want to show the ones that aren't exported, and I want to look at first these World of Goods, and maybe I want some drawing. So you can see from this screen as well, we can kind of post all 4 of these at once. I'm just going to do it one at a time just to show, and we'll see the results and all sort of good stuff. But you do have the option to do a whole bunch of them at once and go get a cup of coffee while you wait. Try to speed up the process. So from this screen, I'm going to hit the post button, and we're going to see some cool stuff happen here, hopefully. So system lets us know if the post is successful, our not exported should switch over to say exported. And it's like I had it timed perfectly, it just happened. If for some reason there's a problem communicating between RealTrack and Sage, or if Sage rejects our invoice and says that there's a problem with it, that status will continue to say not exported, but you'll see this options button light up in the upper right-hand corner. And this is true about anything in the RealTrack system, by the way. When you're looking at jobs or you're looking at estimates, always keep an eye on this options button. If it lights up and turns from this dark color to a greenish color, pop into the system messages, because RealTrack is trying to tell you something that's going on. Hopefully you'll get a message there that says what exactly is going on. The most common one you're going to get with our integration to Sage is the very first time you try to push an invoice into Sage, it's going to tell you that you need to authorize RealTrack to communicate to Sage. So when you pop over into the Sage product, there will be a window on the screen that says, this external program called RealTrack is trying to communicate to us and alter our data. Is it okay? So you have to allow us to communicate before we're able to do that. And the very first time, you'll have to hit the button again then after we're authorized to push it in. So that's going to be the first one everybody's going to see the very first time they try to push an invoice or a purchase order into Sage. So we know that this one has worked all right. It's been exported. So let's take a look at invoice 24136 and check it out. So I'm going to pop into my sales invoices. Before I do that, the Firsty's World of Goods customer already existed in the Sage product, but if it did not, we would automatically create them. So if you want to make things as easy as possible for yourself, if you have a brand new customer you're bringing on board, if you add them as a customer into RealTrack, as soon as you go to post an invoice for that customer, we'll take care of the process of creating that customer for you. I've already posted a few in the past for Firsty's World of Goods here, so it's already been created, but try to make it as easy as possible for everybody. There's no need to double create. You can always double create if you so choose, and we just base it on the customer ID. So you can see the ID here is Firsty's World of Goods, and it's going to be the same for FWOG is also the code for this customer in our RealTrack product. So let's take a look at our invoice 24136. I pull up my sales invoices. 24136. We can see it's unpaid for $2,000. Let me double click on that. We'll try to pull it up side by side and see how she looks. So we see here in Sage 50 that we're shipping 50 units. It's coming from job 1181. We have our drawing information, which is kind of our part descriptor. We know it's $40 a piece for the total $2,000. If we had sales tax or freight, they would also appear in here. And any miscellaneous charges that we added would also be added as line items within the body of the invoice itself. We've got our customer information. The one thing I really want to note, and this is specific only to Sage 50 customers, is that we cannot yet transmit the ship date from RealTrack into Sage. So if you have a ship date, which I don't think that we do, we do. So you can see we shipped it today, which we stamped automatically when we printed the packing list. Sage doesn't quite allow us to transmit that date, and I'm not sure why. I'm working with their developers to open that up so we can add that. So that's the one caveat that I should mention for our Sage customers. It doesn't apply to our QuickBooks customers. You are going to have to do some double entry on that, especially if you want to know that shipment date, which is a pretty important thing, and you definitely want to know that. So unfortunately, there is a little bit of extra work for our Sage customers, and I'm really hoping that with Sage 2016, they'll let us transmit that in. I haven't heard officially yet, but that's our plan. So I'm sure there's going to be some questions on that and the posting process and setting up customers and all that sort of good stuff. So any questions on what we just did, how the invoice looks in Sage, how the invoice looks in RealTrack? What does everybody think?
Don't have any questions yet at this time, Matt.
All right, very good. So we're going to get into the question now of, let's say our customer here, Firsty's World of Goods, is called up, and they want those other 50 skateboard units really quick. My guy on the floor isn't done counting them yet, so I don't have the inventory to ship to them yet and create a packing list quite yet.
Hey, Matt, a question came in.
Well, RealTrack has this idea of, sure, okay.
Did you want to take a break here real quick and answer this one?
Please, go ahead.
Okay. So the question is, does the salesperson also not transmit? Also, the descriptions isn't quite the same. Does it not transfer the info of what the product actually is?
Very good questions. So it's an option to include the sales rep if you so choose. A lot of our customers didn't want, the only gotcha being that you have to create the sales rep in Sage 50 initially. Right now I have our system not set up to transmit the sales rep because I don't want to have to create the sales reps myself. We try to automate as much information as we can, for example, the automatic creation of the customer for you. But that's another thing that isn't quite possible yet with our how we integrate with Sage. They don't allow us to create sales reps in the Sage product. So most of our customers have turned that off just because it adds an extra step to the process. If you so choose and want that sales rep information on the Sage side, you can turn that option on and it works fine. As far as the additional information on the invoice in Sage, we can add additional information if you so choose. I'd be interested in any feedback. The key element in a RealTrack land, if there's a drawing number on a job, that kind of identifies to us what that part is. So you'll note when I go into inventory, I search for that drawing number, and when I push the item into Sage 50, it's also based on that drawing number. If there's no drawing number and it's blank, we'll use the part number from the main job screen instead of the part number, if that makes sense. So right now, because we have a drawing number, we're using that, and that's the information. That's kind of what we consider to be the key detail that tells us what this is that we're moving from, either from this job to inventory and also from inventory to the packing list and also from the packing list into the accounting system. So that's kind of what we key everything off of. Now, if there's other information that you would like to see on that Sage invoice, I have flexibility to give it whatever I want, so I can add additional information. But hopefully that's enough that will let you tie in between what's going on in Sage and what's going on in RealTrack. But just feedback to Jeremy or your account rep, if there's additional information you want in there, I have total freedom to add additional data in there.
Olivia, I see your statement here that for us the part number description is much more important. If you want to shoot me an email, jeremy@realtrack.com, or to your sales rep, and we can go ahead and get that fixed up for you.
Exactly. We'll add a ticket to our system, and I can add additional information, and we'll get that going. We're pretty responsive, and I think people have generally been pretty happy with what we've been able to do for them based on their needs. So not a problem at all.
Okay, Matt, let's go ahead.
Excellent. So I just want to discuss the idea of the virtual inventory now. So as I mentioned, first use world of goods is called up and they want our additional pieces really quick. So I want to create an invoice and a packing list for this, knowing that my guys on the floor are going to finish soon, but aren't done quite yet. My guys and gals, if you will. So on the invoice, I'm going to create another new invoice here. I'm going to get a new invoice number with all my details. And I'm going to ship 50 more units to my customer. Again, we're going to see the $40 amount. So I'll do it in the more correct order in terms of creating my packing list first. So you'll see when I go to preview here, we have no values in the upper portion because we have no units of this currently in our inventory. And there's kind of a red, scary-looking sentence here that says there's no inventory for this item to be shipped. So what's a person to do? Well, we've created this Create Inventory button, which what that's going to do is it's basically going to create a deficit in your inventory of negative 50 Camel skateboards waiting for us to finish those goods. But this is going to allow us to create the packing list and create the documents we need to present to the customer. So even if you need to, for whatever reason, before the job has even begun, invoice and create a packing list for your customer right out of the gate, you have that option in RealTrack 10. And then as you complete those star count operations, we're going to start filling in that hole, if you will. We've dug our hole and we're going to start filling it in. So I'm going to tell the system it's going to create a negative inventory, a virtual inventory for 50 units. I hit the Create Inventory button. Before I do that, I'm going to just note that we're also going to meet our requirements for the next 50 lines here. So you can see we kind of got a red entry that notes we've kind of created a negative inventory. We're going to be filling that up as the people on the floor finish the work. So I'm kind of set now to create my packing list document. Again, we see that our back order number is now 0. Let me zoom that in a little bit. And we're going to ship 50 more units off of our new invoice/packing list number. Same thing should happen here on our invoice. We get the same numbers that are noticed. I'll also create my invoice for it and tell it that it's legitimate. So we've got issued, and we've put in our packing list. It has yet to be pushed into QuickBooks, or I'm sorry, Sage 50. I'll post that again really quick just to get that out of the way. So we switch to exported. The options button is not lit up, so we know everything looks pretty good. And I suspect if we look for 24137 as our invoice, oh, maybe I have to reload this again. There it is. So 50 more units, nothing too exciting there. But for fun, let's have our guy log in to Bradley here, log into our operation, and he's going to complete the 52 units, in fact. So we were manufacturing 102. We were doing a couple extras just in case. Some got destroyed in the process of what have you. So we're going to log off. But we made it through with all 52 units good, and we're going to say operation is complete. So now, if everything worked perfect, when I look at my inventory, I should have 2 units in stock. We've filled in our hole for 50, and we also completed 2 by the end of the run. So let's take a look in our inventory. And I can breathe a sigh of relief. We've filled in our hole of 50 that we created with our packing list with the virtual inventory. And we had the 2 overrun that are sitting now on a shelf somewhere that I can pluck out for later purposes. So any questions on what virtual inventory is, the circumstances in which you create it, what happens when you fill it in, anything along those lines? Does that all make sense?
Okay, Matt, we got one question. When you, the question specifically is, what happens if you scrap one of those parts? I'm assuming he means the virtual inventory parts, the negative inventory.
Well, so when I just went in and registered 52 completed parts. If Bradley instead had said I had completed 51 and I had 1 scrap, which is an option when you log out, we would only have 1 part in inventory at that point. and we do not transfer the scrap parts into inventory. At that point, from an inventory point of view, you would have to add that manually if you wish to capture the fact that you had a scrap part that you may be able to reclaim for another purpose. That would have to be a manual process that you would initiate. If Bradley had said, I completed 49 pieces, but 3 have been scrapped in the final part, we would still have that negative deficit inventory of 1 unit, and somebody's going to be getting grumpy when we go to do the actual packing of the goods into a box or what have you. Was that the answer that you were looking for, or let me know if we could dig into that deeper?
Okay, Matt, we got one more question here. It's a little bit off topic what she says, but it's a pretty easy answer. Can a PO with multiple parts and job numbers be invoiced at once if it is all shipping at the same time?
A PO with multiple jobs? With multiple jobs, you would have to use the sales invoice, which we're going to get into here momentarily. If you were satisfying a customer's PO for the same part multiple times, you could do that within the construct of the job and the invoice. But if a customer has orders for multiple disparate parts that you're building in separate jobs, that's when you would use the sales invoice concept, which is exactly where we're heading right now.
Okay, Matt, let's go ahead and head over there.
Great. So I'm going to create a sales invoice. We're going to pretend this is a couple months later, and Firsty's World of Goods desperately wants, maybe one more of these skateboards, and I just so happen to have one in stock, so I'll be glad to meet their needs. So we're going to use a sales invoice for that sort of scenario where you're selling maybe a good out of inventory that has been sitting there for a while, and it doesn't make sense necessarily to invoice it out of the original job, or if you want to sell disparate parts from inventory to a customer. So a customer places an order for 4 different units. As you complete the production, you want to present them one single invoice that has all of those parts itemized. So here within the toolbox, I'm going to click on the toolbox button menu and bring up our sales invoice interface. So I want to create a new sales invoice because I'm going to pluck 1 or 2 of those skateboards out and send them to Firsty's World of Goods here. So within the sales invoice entry form, I'm going to click the new sales invoice button, which is going to give me a new unique ID. And I'm going to say, selling 2 more skateboards. My customer happens to be, once again, Firsty's World of Goods. So we've got a thing on screen here, a message on screen telling us to add inventory from the Select Inventory tab. And we just happen to have a tab up here called Select Inventory. So I'm going to pop over there. So here we've got all the goods in our inventory. Some of them are actually raw material that I use to build things, like I got some raw steel. And some of them are finished customer products, which are things that we've automatically transferred from jobs into inventory. And then you could possibly even have, like if you wanted to add partial finished goods or those scrap goods into the inventory as well. For whatever reason, we could also have those in here and we could add them onto our list. So Firsty's World of Goods has called me up and they desperately want 1 more of these skateboards because one got broken shipping or what have you. So I can select any good from our inventory. I'm going to select said skateboard. And then we've got our button here to move it to our sales invoice. So you see some cool stuff happens here when I hit that button. When we moved the item from our job into inventory, we captured the exact amount that it cost us to build that part. So with all of our labor and all of our material and everything, when we transferred the skateboard into our inventory, it was costing us $25 and a penny and a fraction of a penny to make each unit. I also know that when we made that original job, I told the system we were selling these at $40 a piece. We also have an other price in the inventory item if you want to override that and either make it 0 for tax purposes, or if you want to say, I think these are worth more than that, I want to charge $60 in the future. We have options of what we want to reflect on our invoice that we're creating. So I'm going to charge my customer $40, but I only want to move 1. And the system down here tells us this is going to end up on the invoice that we just created. So we hit the move button. If I look back on my entry form now, we see I've got a finished customer product, which is my skateboard, selling them 1. So let's take a look at our invoice now and see what's going on. Well, it's looking a little weird because I don't have that product, but we do have this refresh invoice button, which is going to pull in the information from this tab and deposit it on our invoice. So as you add more and more items to our sales invoice, and again, we could just pop in here and add a different type of skateboard or what have you, we come over and hit the refresh button, and you can see it's pulling it into our invoice. So it's coming in from the basic construct of our invoice and all of our inventory, and then pulling it into our invoice itself. So I can have another opportunity to manipulate this number if I so choose, but hopefully when I went to pull it from inventory, I got all that information I wanted, so this price is true and good. Same thing with our terms and FOB. If first these roll of goods had that stuff set up, it would automatically come in, because this is an invoice just like a normal invoice. And you can see we've got lines for all the disparate items that we are going to ship to our customers. So we can add all sorts of different good stuff onto this one object and push it into our Sage product. We can also run a sales order report, which is kind of what we present to our customer. Here's what we're shipping you, the prices and whatnot. We're going to mark it, and it should update our status. Oh, I know we have a little bug where this isn't updating in real time, but it will update to issued when we load it again. So I'm going to do just to show that I'm not a liar. We are working on that, and that is a known thing we'll fix in our next release. Let's take a look at our invoice now, and you can see it has switched to being issued. So I'm going to post this. I could add as many items as I wanted. Uh-oh. I good go. Ah, there we go. So let's get this as a post, and we'll take a look at 24138 in our Sage product. And again, this could be an unlimited number of goods, or I think it's 40 or 50 that you can add to a sales invoice. So let's give it a post and see how she looks. Same issue where it doesn't update that in real time, which I just registered a bug with our team on. But let's take a look at 24138 and see how she looks. So if I look at my sales invoices, 24138. Cool. So the same deal where we know we'll have multiple lines that reflect each item that we've shipped, and you know, it's kind of unexciting comparative to a lot of stuff, but it just works more or less. So, any questions on the sales invoice, creating one, pulling items from inventory, how that process works, and why we want to do it, and why we do a sales invoice versus a regular invoice?
Couple questions here, Matt. First question is, can the packing list be modified to a lesser quantity?
Like after you printed it? I assume that's the question. I'll answer it like that's the question. Yes, it can. So what we do is if you have created a packing list for 50 units, and at some point later you decide, oh no, I'm only ready to ship 40, what happens is when you go to modify that number, we are going to return all 50 units to inventory. If you created the virtual inventory, we'll basically reset it back to 0, if you will. And then when you go to pull those 40 out, we're going to run you through the same process then. We're going to say, okay, you've modified it from 50. We're going to return those 50. You want 40. You're going to see the same screen that's going to pop up as when we do a traditional packing list. So most likely you're going to pull from the same lot as the original 50, but we give you that option. If you want to say, I'm doing 20 from here and 20 from here, you have that same option. So even after you printed the packing list, we do give you that option to basically return the bulk to inventory and then pull out again.
Okay, Matt, we've got two questions here. The first question is are you able to create virtual inventory on the sales invoice like on a regular invoice? And can you put multiple items on an invoice or only on a sales invoice?
Great questions. We do not allow the return to inventory from a sales invoice object, but that wasn't your question. If you needed to create a sales invoice, i.e. for different items, without those items actually being completed, probably the best answer would be to manually create those items in your inventory. That's going to kind of put the onus on you to do the accounting afterwards, but right now we don't have a method to create the negative inventory from one sales invoice for a bunch of different items. that's only tied to a job, and we know what specific item is that job that we're creating the invoice for. As far as with using a traditional normal invoice for more than one item, it's kind of a one-to-one relationship. It's each invoice that's created within a job construct is only for the items in that job, and we only have one line item, if you will, that gives you the quantity for that item. So if you need to create an invoice to present to your customer that's more expansive than that, you'd have to use a sales invoice construct.
Okay, thanks, Matt. We can move on from here.
Wonderful. Well, that's kind of the long and the short of it. We've discussed kind of invoicing in general. We've looked at some examples of how it works in Sage. Again, we can also post purchase orders into Sage, but it's more a topic for the purchasing. We talked about the inventory, virtual inventory. Any questions kind of following up or everything as a whole?
Okay, we'll give it a few minutes here, Matt, but it doesn't look like we have any more questions that we have. I think this was a very educational webinar today.
Great.
So it doesn't look like we have any.
I appreciate everyone's time, and those are some great questions. That was stuff that I wish I had said when I was talking, so I appreciate it. Good work.
All right, folks, if you do happen to have any other questions, again, you can feel free to email me at jeremy@realtrack.com or your sales representative. Please remember to join us for our next scheduled webinar, which is this Thursday on June 26th. That is 5 best practices for job shops, and that features RealTrack's General Manager, Tom Buck. Tom will be discussing winning processes and practices for machine and job shops. He will discuss tactics for implementation, the owner's role, and how RealTrack supports that role. These practices are in place at the most competitive shops in the world and can be implemented into your business. On behalf of Matt and RealTrack Performance ERP, we thank you for joining us in today's webinar, and I will have the recording out shortly. We trust that along with RealTrack, your company will win today's business race. Have a great day, everybody. This session is now closed.